Next news story of the week, and this one is quite remarkable. CD Projekt Red has reaffirmed plans to release an entirely new trilogy of games in the Witcher franchise within 6 years. Now, bearing in mind it currently seems to take about 5 years to create one game, the concept of doing 3 and 6 seems kind of mind-boggling. We've got this statement from CD Projekt Red saying, in a way, yes, I do believe that further games should be delivered in a shorter period of time. As we had stated before, our plan is still to launch the whole trilogy within a 6-year period. So yes, that would mean we would plan to have a shorter development time between The Witcher 4, 5 and 6. Yes, John, I mean, bearing in mind we're in a situation where, for example, Naughty Dog hasn't delivered a brand new game for the entire console generation, simply because the amount of time it takes to make a game. This does seem extremely ambitious, but at the same time, it's all about really how they plan to execute it, right?
They could be taking a Matrix Reloaded Revolutions approach here, building them all at the same time. Yeah, it's also kind of like the dream of episodic content that we saw back when, Telltale was around and they actually pulled it off. But then you had Half-Life with the episodes, the Sin episodes, which got one episode, that kind of thing. maybe they're developing it in that way so that they're like able to leverage the same world and basic structure and a lot of elements shared between them to tell 3 stories. But I mean, if not that, then I really don't see what else they could do, because it's launching 3 games of that scale in that amount of time seems frankly impossible otherwise.
Yes and no, because, we have for good or for bad, we get a new Call of Duty every year. And previously, like Assassin's Creed used to produce a game every 1-2 years. It's doable, right, Oliver?
I think it is doable, but it's really, you're kind of touching on that kind of tension there, Rich, with the mention of Call of Duty, because Call of Duty games are developed kind of asymmetrically on like 2 or 3 year time cycles for the most part, it seems like. And they're very, very similar in terms of gameplay, but also engine technology. Everything about them is pretty similar from year to year. Now, there are some differences. Perhaps, Modern Warfare 3 did not have a traditional campaign, and some people objected to that, including John. They didn't like that very much. That was made in a very short time period, as far as I understand it. There's also some recent controversy with Black Ops 7, again, having some problems with its campaign, potentially. But I think that the realities of producing these games within 3 years would make them a little bit different. Like, you'd have to reuse assets, you'd have to keep text similar, you'd have to reuse gameplay systems. I think we can see this a little bit with a game like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, where according to the developers, that was made in 3 years after the release of Intergrade, basically. And that was made under similar kinds of constraints, but again, you see visual problems, you see different kinds of issues with that game, you see fairly similar gameplay. But I think the promise of this is that you'd be working with Unreal. You have tech that ages better. You also have tech that doesn't need to be iterated on by the team. Perhaps they have some leeway there in terms of adding new visual features. But I do think there's some question about how the audience would feel. Like, how would people perceive Cyberpunk 2077 if by now we also had Cyberpunk 2078 and 2079? I don't think that original game would have sold 35 million odd copies. I think there would be a little bit more fatigue around it. I think it'd be perceived a little bit differently. So I hope they wouldn't run into that problem necessarily. But I think tech-wise, at least looking at the early showings of The Witcher 4 with their demos, which might not correspond fully to the final game, but hopefully will substantially correspond to the final game, I think you can see there a very rich-looking title that probably would have technology that would scale okay into the 2030s with some sequels, right? So I think this is a viable approach if they manage to stick it, which I'm not sure they can. But if they did manage to stick it, I think this would be viable, potentially.
It's an interesting one, because we can kind of assume that the first game that's going to come out, whenever that is, would be cross-generation in nature.
Right.
There would be advantages then. You'd expect for a couple of years. Actually, no. I was going to say a couple of years later, maybe the cross-gen period would be over, but I kind of don't think it will be at this point.
No.
But yes, I do think that there will be continuing improvements to core technology, and obviously the assets will continue to be generated in that particular period. I just think it's more of a logistical issue at this point. I don't really mind if there isn't huge graphical upgrades from one to the next, because everything we've seen so far suggests they're kind of going to nail it. Unreal Engine 5 development will continue regardless of, CD Projekt Red being involved or not, and they are involved. So I don't know. They must have weighed up the pros and cons here and figured that it's doable. John?
All AI. Everything is all AI generated. They figured out the ultimate prompt.
Yes,
it's taken years, but they've done it.
Brought to you by Copilot.
Oh no! Sorry, Rich. I wasn't using Copilot today.
Man.
Here comes the whip again.
Yeah, I don't know. I can only assume that there is a plan here. And I guess we kind of just need to wait and see what they come up with.
See.
I mean, to what extent will there be sort of cross-pollination across all three games? It's kind of got to happen, hasn't it, Oliver?
It does have to happen. I suspect, I mean, even if you look historically at some series, like they mentioned the Mass Effect series here, that had a 2-year cadence between releases, but again, it was Unreal 3. I mean, they were building on it a little bit more, but perhaps that was a bit of a different era. But I really do think that they'd have to have a lot of commonality between releases, especially when you consider the scale of these games and the amount of content that needs to go into them and the amount of time that content takes to iterate on and develop. It probably takes, that full 3-year period at the very least. Maybe they would even reuse the open world, substantially, which is what we saw with like Tears of the Kingdom. Potentially that's another approach they could take. So I think it's like, I don't think it's like totally unrealistic to do this, but I do think it would require a reuse of gameplay and engine that we've never seen from CD Projekt Red, especially with the Red Engine titles, because they were always evolving their core technology, always overhauling their core technology between projects and not making that kind of reuse, right?
Mm-hmm. I guess also if you're going to be developing in parallel, you could have a lot more development, a lot more developers rather, or maybe even split teams, kind of moving between one and the next. Any final thoughts, John? I mean, it's literally not too much to go on here. It's just entire speculation.
It's a little odd to me that a company like that would want to get that many games out so quick, because I always thought CD Projekt's games occupy a very enviable space similar to Rockstar, where people just play them forever, right? People are still playing The Witcher 3. They're still buying The Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk. Like, they just seem to exist in the public consciousness for many, many years and continue to sell. So like, this seems like a slightly risky approach. Like, you could say, oh yeah, if they're able to deliver more and more and more, they'll just keep getting more sales, but that's not, I don't know if that's actually necessary here. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, they do have a track record of delivering exceptionally good expansions.
They do. And in fact, some of the expansions are good enough where, like, I would say Blood and Wine could have almost been its own like game to some degree. It borderline felt that way, right? Different environment, plenty of story, lots to explore. It was awesome.
Mm-hmm. Albeit from a different generation and a different series of development priorities. But, you look at Phantom Liberty as well.
Also good.
Yeah, absolutely.